But welcome back. I gave you a challenge, okay? So the first one, I got secret challenges here, is I just want to see, did you talk to somebody, okay, outside of your organization? So let's see, I said 100%. Okay, raise your hand. So yeah, you're going to make me feel good, right? Okay, so how many people exchanged a business card with somebody? A little better. Okay, even better if you got a benchmarking tour set up, okay? So that'll be your lunchtime. Now, I'm giving you your lunchtime work assignment right now. People want to benchmark, okay? Talk to somebody, see what's going on at Key, okay? Even if it's just a phone call on a topic, that's a benchmarking activity. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce to you, so we have the coast represented here. We have West Coast and Bob's here from the East Coast. So you're right on time, right? 10:30. We should maybe had you in the morning and given Amy a little better time to wake up. Bob is the CEO and founder of Gold Group Enterprises, where he's built an emerging business focused on helping organizations create and get to market with technology-based products and services. Bob has a successful track record in creating and developing technology solutions that help launch companies, open new markets, and help organizations increase revenue and margin. Let's give a big Buckeye welcome to Bob.
Well, thank you, everyone. I just have to thank Peg, Robin, Matt, the whole team. We've spent 2 days here, Shelley and I, and it's my first trip to Ohio State, so I'm really blown away by the whole environment, the friendliness, and just the whole collaboration that's going on in Co. So my talk is interesting. It's maybe not a typical talk you'd find in operational excellence or IT leadership. So it's going to focus on some underlying behaviors amongst IT and business that either can cause projects to be successful or not, and dealing with habits, right? How do you change a habit, right? So that's what we're going to get into. And so as a great segue, Amy was a great straight man for me, at least today. I don't know about last night. So, so there were 5 things I want to point out that they said, and as we go through this presentation, I think you'll see them kind of all come to life. So one is, I love the inverted pyramid, right? You don't see that a lot. The individual contributors are up top, right? So that says a lot for the culture and brand of that company. You know, if you go to work there and you're interviewing and you see an inverted pyramid, it's kind of neat, right? The next is, Amy used the term the aha moment. So when they had this epiphany, they hit an aha moment, and that was the moment they changed their strategy and behavior, right? Did I get that right? The other interesting comment she made, they chose the term continuous improvement as opposed to lean or some other term for the very reason they wanted to create their own brand that would allow them to adopt and change as they at Nordstrom's would deem necessary during their journey. They didn't want to necessarily be tied to something else, right? So that was an interesting decision, you know, on their part. The other one was at one of the first workshop meetings, one of Amy's bosses did not want the business people at the meeting, right? Because she probably didn't trust that it would do more harm than good, right? So when she reversed her perspective of that, she went to Amy, and Amy got what she wanted, but not until she reached the conclusion that that's a good thing. Right? So if she didn't reach that conclusion, Amy would have had to work harder, but I'm confident she would have figured it out anyway. And the last one is, it's clear from listening to that talk that Micah, Amy spend a lot of time on getting people to be invested in the process. And in fact, they have pretty clear evidence that people who are not invested, those projects aren't as successful as those people who are invested. So the question is, what does that mean to be invested, and how do you get people invested in the process? So these are all points we're going to cover during the talk. So I just thought I'd, relate the two to that. So because it's a little bit of a different kind of talk, and I need everyone to kind of take a deep breath and get out of their mind and body for a second, a little mental yoga. So I just put up this brain teaser. Any idea what this is, what this means? Can you get a raise and bonus? Like, is your boss here or no, Jack? All right. 10 grand tomorrow. You're in. That's pretty good. 3 degrees below zero. I didn't get this when someone showed me this. So my next hint was going to be it's about the weather, it's getting colder, and then maybe someone gets it. But I need you at a couple meetings, Jack. All right? Okay, so before I get into the heart of the agenda and things, let me tell you a little bit about myself so you have some context. So I'm what you call a behavioral technologist. So I have 20 plus years research and development on digital to human persuasion, motivation, how to build trust, credibility, reciprocity in a piece of technology, in a piece of software. Whether that's in a car navigation system, it's a phone application, it's on a computer, right? And also by doing that, I had to study how humans relate to each other. And this particular talk is more on the human to human, right? So it's amazing the difference in similarities between human to human believability and how humans react to applications and the strategies around it. So with that, I've worked with some of the world's leading behavioral psychologists, cognitive neuroscientists, sociologists, anthropologists, and those sort of things. So it was interesting. We built way back in the 90s when the internet came out, the first 4 ever electronic 401k systems and electronic trading systems, because back then you could only interact with your money via fax or a call center, right? And no one was going to ever trust the internet to do a transaction, right? You remember those days. So, but you could imagine just getting people to understand it, adopt it, use it, change a habit, was very difficult. So I actually ended up hiring a woman who was the chief human factors engineer at NASA. And, we worked a lot with them. And then on the technology and media, we still weren't hitting the mark. So what I did was I acquired and ended up owning a small animation picture company, Magnet Pictures. And I studied how movies were made versus how software is developed and what are the differences in testing, in editing, in creation, in design. That's a whole fascinating lecture among itself. And I came to the conclusion that no matter how good user interface people are or agency people, they don't really understand how to make people laugh or cry or emote. So that's why I acquired these entertainment people. So we ended up mixing the NASA human factors with entertainment people, with user interface people, with technologists. And then we did a lot of experiments. So I ended up acquiring some farmland, and we won a science award for kids who had development issues, both mental and physical, where we brought them to the farm and they did work with their hands digging. It was fascinating. And then we did something with technology, and it was like this whole experience, physical, technological, and it was amazing to see the children and what happened and the smiles and all types of things. So we've applied a lot of these techniques. And just to bring you up to speed now, we're doing a lot of work around in-the-moment engagement and how to get people to do something, whether that's in a store, walking around. We're doing a lot in healthcare, so we're just getting through a clinical trial in Nebraska for high-risk pregnant women who live at least an hour or more from a hospital and an hour or more from their doctor. And they have a lot of risks and comorbidities. So how do you do a care coordination plan? How do you engage them? when it gets dark and you feel isolated at night, right? What's the best techniques? And how do they build trust and credibility? What you're telling them to do is the right thing, right? Why should they listen? So, and just to point out one thing, like in insurance, because I know there's a lot of nationwide folks, you know, it's interesting, in insurance, whether it be property and casualty or car, you know, a lot of insurance companies view the moment of truth when you're in an accident. How they deal with you is, it relates to retention, cross-selling, upselling, you know, so your car just got hit, you're on a highway, and how do they deal with you in the moment? You know, and that could either build tremendous believability in the brand or frustrate them about the brand, right? So, okay, so these are some of the kind of learning objectives. I'm not going to go through it, that we want to accomplish today, right? And the real simple goal, the takeaway, is for today is to just understand some of the underlying behavioral dynamics that exist between people, because you'd be surprised if you understand some of these, how you'll think about how to get people to do something, or how to apply a continuous improvement process, or whatever you want to accomplish operationally or from an IT perspective. Okay, so one more thing before we get into the meat of it is, in neuroscience, there's actually a term called the aha moment, and it actually means what you would think it means, okay? But before we get to that, by the way, that's the band AHA, for those of you who don't know, okay? But what inspires you? Like, I'll give you an example, and then I want to hear people. What was the last thing that inspired you, right? So I live on the beach in New Jersey, and I remember I was focused on work, and I'm pulling up, and all of a sudden, it was when that moon was full, whatever, but the sun was setting. It was like gorgeous. I felt like I could accomplish almost any task. It was like a sudden aha moment. I look up, and I was really inspired. So my question is, whether it's a message you got, a phone call, an image, whatever, any hands, what has inspired you recently? What's been an inspirational moment? Anybody? Somebody must be inspired. Yes. Okay. Okay, now why? Why was that inspirational? Okay, anybody else? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So, in this song, it's about his dream to meet this perfect girl, and this is sort of his aha moment when she walks in the door, in the song. But there are two scientists, one from Northwestern, sorry about that, Ohio State, and one from Drexel, that actually proved if you could inspire someone in the moment, they're 3 to 5 times more likely to make a decision and be less analytical, right? So a lot of people do it intuitively, like the coach when they send the kid into the field, go, kick butt, right? It's like short, inspirational, right? And, there are techniques naturally used, let's say, in store, other places, to inspire someone so they act, right? Okay, so I just want to set some foundational elements of what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do is, you can see the topics. What we're going to first go through, we're going to set the stage. We're going to talk about personal brands, right? Most people think of brands in a company. We're going to talk about personal brands and why certain people could accomplish more than others, right? And then we're going to talk about innovation, right? And relate those two. How do you innovate through technology at your company, right? And what are the obstacles you face? And then we're going to cover techniques to put that all together. And like my top 10 list of things you can do to help yourself accomplish the tasks you set out to do on a daily basis. Okay, so what's a brand people like? I'll say OSU for me, right? I'm sold now, okay. But anybody, what's a good brand? Besides the one you work for. Like, what's a brand you like? Give me a brand someone buys. Apple. Why do you like Apple? Okay. All right, anybody else? Any other brands? Yes. Nordstrom and their customer service. Okay, good choice. Anybody else? One more. Any other brand? Okay, Toyota and the reliability. Okay. Okay, so by the way, a little bit more about my personal brand. I live in New Jersey, got 3 kids. I like to be a closet psychologist, like to help people. You know, that's a little bit about me. Oh, I did go to Rutgers, and it's going to be ugly when Ohio State plays us in a few weeks. So, what's that? Yeah. I don't think you have to do too much hoping, okay? But just to show you that Shelley and I, that if Ohio State is not playing Rutgers, I'll root for them. There you go. Okay, so how do you make your brand believable? So we're going to talk about what is a brand behaviorally and cognitively. What's a brand really mean? And what is believable mean, right? And then again, we're going to end with showing you how to impact your brand. Okay, so this is actually, I think, from the definition of the American Ad Association, and I just morphed it into a person, right? So really, that's what a brand is. It's a bridge. It's an expectation, right? So when you said Nordstrom and customer service, right? It's not just because Nordstrom puts up an ad and says we have good customer service. If they don't fulfill, that brand message becomes empty, and your believability, you don't trust the message and you don't find it credible, right? So you have to understand a brand is not just the sexy marketing. You have to fulfill against that, right? Now let's equate it to us, myself, Shelley, John over here, right? So what is your brand? How people perceive you in the organization. So as an example, a while back I had 2 people come to me and say, Bob, individually, separately, I got this great idea for something we want to do. We think it can help the company for all these reasons and all these metrics. And I ended up going with one of those 2. I didn't do the other one. And the reason why is I didn't believe the brand of that person and the team could accomplish the goal. Now, because I'm in this business, it's more conscious for me, but maybe that was subconscious, right? So whatever reason I told them, and maybe I told them exactly that, or maybe I didn't. But the point of view is I didn't believe in that particular brand. Okay? So it's very important to set this stage, and you'll see why. And what are the techniques where people will believe in your brand better? So you're more likely, Amy's more likely for the bosses to say yes more often, or whatever the case may be, right? Or for people at Nationwide to view staying what they're doing is higher risk to their personal brand than switching to what you want them to do. So how do you get them to reach that conclusion? Because if you don't, they're not going to change. Right, period. It doesn't matter how great your process is. Okay, so the first thing is, and you know, there's some interesting ways to look at this, but the interesting thing is, you know, do a self-assessment, ask people what they think of your brand, right? And I do some of this. It could be funny and it could be intense, right? So as an example, if my brand is, let's say Bob Gold is a change agent, right, and I'm a risk taker, okay? Like we do a lot in healthcare. I was just visiting a trauma center in Pittsburgh to figure out the best engagement strategies, but nonetheless, you don't go to the, and sometimes people in IT and all of us get so excited, you tell the people who run the trauma center, oh, we're going to innovate. And they're like, that word, they run for the hills. You just lost it. Like, no, we run a trauma center. Like, this has to be proven. Like, you're not going to innovate in my place. Okay? So you have to be really cognizant of how you're viewed. And if you understand how you're viewed, and then the person you're talking to, you'll message differently. You'd be shocked by tweaking a message slightly. You'll get someone to say yes, right? By how you present what it is and how they feel you are, right? On the other hand, if someone views you as highly organized, detailed, operational person, and they want to change a department, they're probably not going to come to you to do that, right? They don't think you can do that, right? Okay, so now we're going to explore personal brands and believability and what it means to gain trust, credibility, right? So, first of all, tell me, what's the definition of trust? What's trust to you? Anybody? No right answer. What's trust? What's that? Okay, someone who follows through on their commitments. Anything else? What's trust? What's that? Loyalty? Okay. What's that? Take input without verification. Okay, so sort of behaviorally and somewhat cognitively, trust is you will not put me in harm's way. And actually, humans only have one level of trust on a given subject. So I remember when my son was about 18, I would not trust him with his friends with the liquor cabinet when I wasn't there. But I actually would trust that he would push his sister out of the way of a car and get hit, right? So just so you know, whatever you think, there aren't levels of trust on a particular subject, right? It doesn't mean, because you could trust somebody to do something here, but not trust them here, right? And there's some people you may not trust no matter what, right? Okay, but my point is, trust on a particular subject is absolute, right? And it means you will not put me in harm's way. Okay? What do you think credibility is? What's the definition of credibility? What's that? You're going to do what you say you're going to do. Anybody else? What, proven? Someone with experience. Okay. And people use these words interchangeably, right? Trust, credibility. They're very, very different, and there are ways of creating formulas and algorithms around this whole thing, which I'm not going to get into. This is a whole science. Okay, but credibility says, I feel you will help further my cause. Trust is, I feel you will not put me in harm's way. Okay, so let me give you a few examples, real examples. So when my nephew became a stockbroker, loved the kid, very friendly, and I actually trust he would not put me in harm's way. So he comes, Uncle Bob, give me some money to invest, whatever. What would have been, so mentally, I'm giving him high points for trust and 0 for credibility, like further my cause. The kid has no clue, right? So if he understood this, a smarter approach would have been to grab Jack, who was a partner in the firm, about my age, whatever it may be, say, Jack, come with me to the meeting. We're going to tell Uncle Bob we're a team. So now they come as a team, and Jack tells me he has 10 clients that kind of about like me, and he has successful 20 years. I can't possibly trust Jack because I don't know Jack. I don't know. But I definitely give him points for credibility. I trust my nephew. I bet you they get 2 to 3 times the amount of money. See? Right? Just by a change in how, if my nephew understood this theory, he would have been better off. Right? But he didn't. So he just came and was all excited and told me. And I'll give you some other like real life examples. You know, I've done some different projects with McKinsey and other firms. And a lot of times at corporations, whether you're internal or external, people don't, like maybe the reason why Amy didn't want to expose, Amy's boss didn't want to expose to the business people this until she understood it, is what happens a lot is, okay, I say to myself, we need help here. And yeah, maybe I want an outside consultant or I want to bring an inside consulting team. But the team's very credible that I'm looking to bring in, but I don't trust they're not going to put me in harm's way. They're going to uncover stuff. I may get fired. Like, are they going to reach the conclusion that the things are failing and a lot of it's to me? So I make up an excuse why I don't want to use the team, whether it's an internal team or an external team. And the reality is, if the team understood that, and there's ways of understanding that, they would work on building my trust, they would get the deal. As opposed to telling me how great they are, they've done this. Here's a PowerPoint, we've done this for 50 other people. See, I don't tell them that, but I know that. I know they could do good work. Right? I just don't trust they won't put me in harm's way, so I don't cut the deal. Right? Very important. One other point, there are actually 3 levels of credibility. There's only 1 level of trust: perceived, surface, and earned. So maybe I have some perceived credibility today because Robin asked me to speak and I'm here, right? Okay. Don't know whether to trust me, but I have maybe perceived credibility. Then there's surface credibility. Maybe I do the presentation, you like it, whatever it is. And then there's earned credibility. Now, interestingly enough, with earned credibility, you don't have to be on a successful project with someone to earn respective credibility. You just have to believe the person's good and they could further your cause, right? But so there are actually levels of credibility. So the idea in the real science is probably 6 other attributes and factors that go into this. But we have this thing, the believability quotient. So like when I gave you the high scores for trust credibility, if you view this as in like the Nordstrom map, 1 to 10, if I view each of these as 1 to 10, what's my score? And if I get a 20, I'm getting whatever I want. Okay, period. I did it. It doesn't matter what I asked for, I'm getting it. If I get a 2 or 3, it doesn't matter what I asked for, I'm not getting it. Right? And then most of the world lives in the middle of that, right? I mean, the reality. Okay, so I'm not going to cover this that much. I'll get back to this. So then the question is, what can we do here to build brand believability? Okay, so let's look at, to kind of ease into this, to ease into the discussion, we picked the governor of this state versus Trump, okay? And we're going to discuss this in a minute. So, you know, an OSU guy, right, has whatever it is, you know, all these accomplishments, youngest person ever elected to that. That's pretty neat, right? All that. And there he is, okay? There he is. Okay. So these are sort of his stated things, not ours, by the way. So my question to you, in terms of trust and credibility, let's just try to explore those 2 concepts here. So anyone do you trust Donald Trump? Do you find him credible, right? With Kasich, you know, what are your thoughts? Anyone? on these candidates, right? So, okay, so no, so let's stay with Kyle's thing. He would give him higher score on credibility, let's just say, than trust, right? So now, if you're Donald Trump now, let's switch. I'm guessing he absolutely knows that. So what should be his strategy when he picks a vice president? Think about it. Someone who people trust. Okay, smart choice. You know, some crazy nut job, you know, who's not bound by typical politics, right? Okay. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. Whatever, it's everyone's personal feeling, okay? But now you got sort of a COO, the vice president, you know, who's someone who people could trust. And maybe that's a more believable, you know, situation. You know, and I don't know Kasich as well, but maybe his is the opposite, you know, when you look outside of Ohio. Right? You know, here it may be a little different. Maybe he's some guy you can latch onto and trust that he won't put the country in harm's way, but how credible would he be as President of the United States? So he should pick someone that is credible, right? Let's just assume he's more trustworthy for this argument. You get it? So, but this is what you guys should do in your teams, or who do you go to ask for support, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about levels of innovation that a lot of people in IT try to accomplish, and then we're going to put it all together, right? So then we're going to put it together with the brand and the projects and, you know, all those things, right? So how does the company that you work at view innovation? What is even what is a definition of innovation? Anybody? Like, what would be your definition of innovation, either in general or kind of where you work? Any thoughts? What is innovation? Amy? Okay. Okay. Any other comments on innovation? Has anyone here felt at work, have you recently accomplished a major innovation? Like, is there any projects that was a major innovation? Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? But isn't there a difference between just simple change and innovation, right? To do something that you haven't done before, okay, that's a change. But to do something that you haven't done before and make it your new standard, or make it the new accepted best practice, that's where you change. That's where you become innovation from change. Right. No, that's a good. You're my straight man. So there we go. Thank you. What's your name? Jeff? What hat is that? I can't see. All right. All right. How come you didn't bring one for me, Jeff? All right. All right. So, we got to change that habit, right? So let's look at levels of innovation, right? And The question is, too, is it harder to accomplish something disruptive or incremental? And it's interesting. It's not the answer you think. It depends on a lot of factors. So how come this thing is... So let's look at incremental innovation, right? The result of continuous improvement, right? We're getting better every day, okay? Substantial, we're altering a product or solution. We're changing a balance of power. When we did work for Prudential Investments, and in the 401k business, they were 14th. They wanted to be in the top 5. Within 5 years, they were in the top 5. Right? So that's changing, right, a balance of power. Okay? It's kind of substantial. So disruptive, you're creating a new market. You're kind of inventing a new thingamajig, a new process, right? It's disruptive, right? So those are kind of levels of technology, innovation, and clearly, in some respects, going in with a very disruptive idea, you may feel you're not going to even bother because no one's going to do it, right? No one's going to listen. It's too big. It's too all-encompassing, right? Or not. Okay, so now we're going to get into how to put this all together and what are some strategies that you can put in play to affect your ability to get things done, do innovative projects, and, so to speak, move the needle a little bit. Yeah, I like this slide. Now, interestingly enough, Amy's CFO doesn't think they do that, right? Okay, so just think about it. They're able to accomplish more. What did Micah say? One of the main reasons, I got that guy on our side, implying if you don't, maybe they'd have half the results. Okay? And maybe they lucked out. He's a guy who gets it. Maybe it was the work they did to get him to realize, to make him invested, even though he's not a good practitioner, he's invested in the process. Okay? Right? Okay. So I've worked in and around all size companies, Fortune 500, you know. So these are some anecdotal comments. Let's say she represents a business leader of the company. Don't get it means IT. Right? Always over budget, costs. Right? They don't understand. My ass is on the line. You know, I got to produce tomorrow. I don't want to hear about redoing this architecture thing. Right? Don't quite understand it. I'm going to use an outside firm. No one listens to me. Right? You know, right? I mean, it's not that uncommon, right? So, what if someone has any of those, what could be a behavior? I've seen so many times it was ridiculous that IT was not included in strategic planning because the business people felt they had to get through the business issues before they brought IT in. Right? I think that's absurd personally, but nonetheless, certainly, if you don't necessarily think having IT at the table during strategic, if that's your belief, from a trust credibility, they will not advance my cause. In fact, they may put me in harm's way. Because I have an IT person, they go to the CTO, and they find out I'm planning this thing, they can thwart me. So you know what? Let's not tell them till we need some work done. You know, I just don't want them involved, right? And I pay a lot of money, my allocation in my P&L for my budget. I'm going to go to the CFO saying I need to pay 10% less next year. Whatever happens to IT, I don't care. Right? You know, that type of thing. Like, I just can't afford it. I didn't get my bonus. and I'm reducing my costs in my business unit, and I'm reducing my allocation to IT, and it is what it is. Okay, so here's the IT guy, right? And it's not that dissimilar in a lot of cases, okay? You know, on how IT wants to work, okay? And in general, from sort of physics, there is a difference. A business person just wants, in their mind, a simple function done. That simple function could be 18 months and $400,000. And what do you mean? Just add this to the database. What do you mean? Oh, they always you know, and it may mean a whole new architecture, a whole new database schema. It may mean all these things, but they just want this function done. Whereas IT is looking at how do we efficient, how do we roll things out, so when other people come, we could do it efficiently, right? We have a modular architecture, SOA, you know, all those terms. So there is legitimately, first of all, you have to recognize there is legitimately that dichotomy from thinking things of a process to thinking things functionally, right? Okay, so the only time business people typically think a process, they typically think functionally. When they think process, it's around their own business processes. They're not concerned about necessarily all the IT processes, right? We're learning them. Okay, and the last thing, and we'll get to the strategies, you know, having done a lot of activities that cause change, even positive change causes stress. Right? We're wired to be creatures of habit, right? So it's not necessarily an easy thing for IT to recommend things to people that cause a change, right? Now, on the other hand, on the positive side, you could be admired and respected. They fought through. It's working, like in the case of Amy and Micah. Right? Now they have a lot of respect and admiration. So when they go back, it gets a little easier. Right? A little bit easier, right, to do it. Okay, so there's both sides of the coin, you know, when you're looking at this. Okay, so one interesting thing I see in talking to, let's say, C-level execs and IT people, their definition of outcome is different. So we're going to explore that, right? So a lot of times when, let's say, we in IT get excited, well, we're going to improve this process. And here's the benefits, right? And it enables us to scale and do this and do that. But you're not connecting it to the outcome which will cause them to say yes all the time. So again, right, so this is like features. Oh, we're going to build something that's going to do this, right? So a lot of times you talk about the product. Okay, better than just talking about the product is talking about the process. We're going to develop this process which does these things, right? So that now you're getting closer. And then finally, you know, what are the outcomes? So let's just say, let's start with the CEO. Okay, I realize we come from all different companies, all different sizes, and this is generic. So I'm about to put up what I think are the top 5 or 6 things that a CEO cares about. But the purpose of this is not to take that list. It's for you to think about in your organization what your CEO cares about. So my question is, what do CEOs care about? Outcomes. Forget anything else. What's an outcome that would make him or her happy? Profitable. Okay. What else? Market share. Right. What else? Share price. Okay, I'm not. You guys got it, right? So if you're in the old elevator pitch thing for 2 floors, so imagine the difference is Shelly's the CEO. Shelly, I believe we can do something that can impact the share price. Shelly says, "Oh, talk to my secretary. Come up this afternoon." Next, Shelly, I got this great process improvement on all this stuff. Can we talk? Shelly says, yeah, see my secretary in 2017, I'm available, right? You know, you just didn't connect it, right? You know? And don't get me wrong, I'm being a little facetious, right? But that's the point. Okay, COO. What does a COO care about? What? Reliability. Reduce staff. Okay, anything else? Okay, gross margin, quality, right? And again, these are all mixed. It's not that the CEO doesn't, right? I mean, I'm just putting up general things, and they're more into process, right? That's their job, a COO. The interesting thing, just from a behavior perspective, the larger the company, the big difference between a president, COO, and CEO, the CEO spends most of his day talking to people who don't care about him and have no reason to believe him. So Wall Street analysts, press analysts, the board of directors, clients. Okay, so maybe the CEO is spending 70% of the time with people he has to build trust and credibility with because they don't report to him. Okay, because we want to get our stock price to be a growth stock, not a hold, right? The COO, his life is more everyone reports to him or her, right? And there's more control there. So it's a little different. And I'm not going to go through each one, but you can see the CFO, right? Some of these things. And they all care about risk management at different levels, right? The CEO, more market risk. The CFO, more financial risk. CIO, right? And the real question as a CIO, what's going to get you thought of as your brand as a peer? Right, as opposed to the tech guy, right? You know, like what is the CIO can do to increase the brand believability, trust, credibility, right? And again, it's all in, and the same with the sales team. So I would say that a lot of times when we produce benefits, they're at a process level. And just really think through who is paying, what is it from a public-facing perspective, and what would be an outcome, right, that someone would look at and say, okay, if that's the outcome, I don't really understand what you're talking about, but you got your $1 million, right? If you tell me that's the outcome, I'm in, right? Okay, but if you don't tell the outcome, boy, you got to work 4 months, more PowerPoints, more presentations, more meetings, and all. If you just switched your messaging, you could have avoided all that. You follow? You know, the other thing, I'm not going to belabor it, is just like everyone in the room, you have personal outcomes you want. So does, let's say, the CEO of a large company. Right? We want to do more business in Europe. In fact, I'm the CEO, and I'd like to live half the time in Europe. So if someone comes to me with an idea about improving Europe, I'll probably more likely to approve that because it helps me personally. Right? So also think through, everyone's not always rational. That's what humans are about. So there's the rational side, and then there's the personal side. So when you message to people, and I don't mean in a corporate deck or anything, but when you're talking to people, if they really, truly think you understand the business outcomes and you understand what makes them tick personally, wow. Wow, they'll go to you every time, right? Okay, so now we're going to start to get into some processes that have worked to put this all together, okay? So build a believability team. We talked about that a little bit, right? You know, it was interesting. I remember I was doing work for a medium-sized company in Pennsylvania, and they had one woman, and everyone in the company didn't understand, like, all the water cooler talk. She's kind of off the wall, and she has all these crazy ideas, and I don't understand why the CEO loves her. Like, I think we should get rid of her, you know? And in the end of the day, here's the reason, which the CEO probably would have told people if they asked. He came up through finance. He was a CFO guy. And he knew his brand wasn't one to come up with disruptive, innovative things. So he had her on the team, and he took maybe one of 20 of her ideas, but he couldn't do it, right? It's just like, how do you build your team? If you come up through sales and you're the CEO, or you're more creative, you probably don't have that type of person. You probably have someone who's more operation, who could take your crazy things and make it work, channel the chaos. But you got it, when you form a team, like, what's your believability team to the people you're talking to, right? Do you have someone they believe can really execute? Or are you talking that like, can you design, right? Can you strategize? Do you really have the ability to take a high-level business requirement and turn that into something that works in the field that makes the business person feel good? Why should I believe you can do that? So one thing to do is think about that. Like, how are you presenting your team? And a lot of times it's just how you present the team. If you understand, well, here's probably their 4 objections, right? I don't want to do it because it's a lot of money and I may risk my job if I approve their thing, right? If that's an objection, you can deal with it. The next is day in the life. So outcome descriptions. I'm really big on this in that, let's say you have a person on a team that's the GUI graphic developer, right? Well, maybe their description, and it's for helping your 10,000 person sales force look up something when they're about to walk into a client, that gives them the top 5 points they should make versus the competitor that the client's using. Let's just say that's an application to help the sales force. The description to the person should be, listen, your goal is within 10 seconds, we're going to present something that's understandable by an average salesperson in the field, in the sun, in the light, that's going to get them the 5 top things. As opposed to, we need a really neat GUI interface with the right colors and responsive, and right? So try to come up with outcome descriptions, which are a lot tied to metrics or different outcomes, and include that in the role, right? Okay. And we talked about team balance. The other interesting thing I found very effective, extremely effective at an executive level, is instead of all the PowerPoints and this, writing up a 1 or 2 page story using a real person. Like when we were helping, it was a large supermarket chain with some changes, we weren't getting there. And then we wrote up the story about Nicole, who was a typical shopper, and here's her experience today. And it was only like a page. And here's Nicole's life after we make all these changes. Man, we got approval on that project. From that 1 page, we just talked like, okay. And they looked at it and said, oh man, now I see the outcome, right? All the slides and the graphs and the charts didn't work, right? So I think if you tell a story of what is the life and existence of people here or the company or the customer after we make the change, right? Don't worry about the process improvement does these 10 things. Okay, what does that mean to that stakeholder, whether it be a customer, a salesperson, executives, right? People internal. What's the story, right? Stories work. People like stories, right? Storytelling's good. And that's what you have to become. Tell a story. Okay, so we talked about a lot of this. And the other interesting thing is, in terms of the person that needs to approve or buy in to it, a lot of times they don't believe in themselves. It's not you. And they don't think they could do it. Like we're working in healthcare with an organization that does home health. And they send nurses to the field. And they realize they need a better way to scale and use some technologies that could be a virtual version of the nurse and assist. So we're working, and I think this guy is one of the smartest guys out there and gets it operationally, strategically. So we had a few meetings, wasn't going anywhere. Finally, by the methodology of the meeting, we got him to say, Bob, I love this, but I don't believe I could socialize the internal call center changes we need to make if we do this. So I don't feel comfortable doing it. Okay, that admission was beautiful. Now that we really understood, it wasn't all the other objections. He didn't feel he could do within his department what needed to be done to take advantage of the technology. So finally he fessed up. We were then able to address it and we got the work done, right? But until we drew that out. So just keep in mind, why are you getting no? Why are you having trouble? It's not always you, right? It could be they don't believe in themselves or their end of the things to do anything with the improvements you're going to make. Okay? So once you get that, you could address it. If you don't know that, you'll never address it, right? How can you address it? Okay, so this is what Amy and Micah, I think, do wonderful, okay? So this is kind of 4 eyes. So identify. So you need to figure out, is this person really identifying with what we're trying to do? Not do they understand it, are they identifying with it? Okay. Next is, okay, we got them to identify, now we involve them. Okay? Because if you involve someone and they feel part of it, they're more likely to be connected, want to do it, and feel ownership, right? And then, this is a key one. Does the person believe they can influence the outcome? So in other words, if I'm a business guy and I say, okay, I want this system built, and I don't believe once I turn it over and I give you my requirements, I'm going to be able to influence a lot of it. Now it becomes this separate IT and it is what it is until I see it and I don't like it, right? So they need to feel like they could have iterative influence, okay? And fourth, that results in them being invested. Because if they're invested, you got them. In fact, they'll be your champion. You don't have to sell anymore. They'll go around promoting whatever it is you want them to promote in whatever way you want them to do it because they're invested. So this is what you should think about before you present information and who you're talking to. How do we get them to identify, involve? How do we articulate how you're going to influence the project? Think about that, right? Because if you're presenting to me and I feel Chris and Tracy came up with something that I could have a lot of influence over, whether in reality I do or not, or I don't have the time anyway, it doesn't matter, right? I will more likely approve their project versus somebody else's, right? Okay, so in terms of the checklist, how believable are you or your team? How confident are they, right? Use the 4 eyes. And we kind of covered this. Don't worry about the dream, create, build process. So, that's kind of a checklist when you're looking about how to engage people in information. Okay. So, what are the top 10? Number 10, okay. Build believability among trusted advisors. Okay. Sometimes to create influence, you can't always get to the person. So think through who they trust and try to get someone they already trust or know on your team so you're not telling the person that it's a good idea. They are, right? This is key, and this is very hard. We all get excited and we want to share information. Like we find out a good supporting piece of article or something about what we're trying to do and we send it around. Okay, in many respects, you're hurting yourself. Think about communicating information, appending what's the outcome and why you're communicating. Like, okay, we could raise the stock, we could do these things. Here's something that supports that, right? So think about the impact of the person reading it. Oh, another piece of content, another deck, another, right? So, be more selective. Don't feel you need to communicate certain things in a way that's disconnected from the outcomes, right? Because one thing is, in today's day and age, it's information overload. There's 50 million messages we're getting a day. How much can anyone absorb? So what am I going to listen to, no matter how good it is what you're telling me? Can I pay attention? Okay, but maybe I'll prioritize. If I have to pay attention to these 10 things and I'm realistically can only do 2 today, I tell you, if the communication starts with one of my outcomes I'm interested, that's one of the 2 I'm going to listen to. Okay, no matter how good, I could have missed the best opportunity somewhere else, but I'm just not going to pay attention, right? So that's very important. Okay. And, I think a lot of people do this well. If you're building something, get out in the field, right? Hang out with the user community. We did something for Amtrak. I rode God knows how many trains up and down and, a lot of stuff. So get out there. You're much more credible if you have a real good understanding of what happens, like on the floor in the shoe department, right, with a salesperson, than if you have no matter how right you are, people are not going to listen as much, right? So understand, and business people love that. Love that you take the time to truly understand what's happening in the moment, in the field, right? Period. Like I know in insurance, we deal a lot, and a lot of times the third-party brokers, don't necessarily believe that corporate understands what they go through in the field to sell insurance. They don't have a good granular understanding. They don't get it, right? Okay. Build strong connection to the future. Look, all the C-level suites, it's about tomorrow, right? Today is today. What are you doing tomorrow? So, just relate what you're doing to the future, right? And the outcomes of those things. Okay, what is the day in the life? What does this really mean? Okay. Tell life stories after that, right? Like I gave the example with Nicole. Put it into a persona. That works. Tell the story through a customer's eyes of what this means, through a salesperson's eyes, through an operations eyes, through a partner's eyes. Just tell a story, not decks and things and all that. You could support that with more material, but lead with the story. Right? People love stories. Again, market outcomes. Okay? Okay, this is another thing that I noticed people in business units are a little better than executives in IT at in selling up. Right? So, in other words, if you're presenting to someone or they're on the team and they have bosses, so what is it they cut and paste at their meetings that you give them? Do they really take your stuff? Again, if it's not believable, they may be okay with you giving it to them, but now they got to cut and paste because the big boss doesn't want to hear all this process and all this words. And so what they end up doing is having to spend a lot of time figuring out how to present it. So one question you should ask to this guy or gal, what do you do with the information we give you on the project to sell it to your bosses? Just ask the question. Oh, well, what I do is this, this, and this. Well, if we gave it to you in that format with that, oh, man, that would be unbelievable. Okay, but just ask the question, right? Plus it'll give you insights to what they think their bosses care about. So you'll actually, just by asking that question, you'll get answers you normally wouldn't get out of them, right? Okay, so what this means is, from a brand, from an innovation, from risk management, is, look, whatever portfolios we all have personally, you have money in a checking account, a bank, we put it into a risky stock, whatever that is, right? That says something about who we are, right? How we deal with risk, how we deal with our money, well, so does a company have a portfolio strategy, right? Okay, in other words, what is the company really investing in? What are they telling if it's public Wall Street? What are they telling external customers? What is it that the powers that be are telling about the portfolio and the future? Right, so as an example, one company we partner with a lot, it's, R. Donnelley in Chicago, and their stock price is taking a hit because they're viewed, let's say, as an old line printer. Okay, and they're a Fortune 100 company, but so they're telling Wall Street, we're going to be a 360-degree communications company, right? We're not printers. Okay, that's what they're telling Wall Street. And we're taking some key sectors, retail and healthcare, and we're going to be growing organically and through M&A, and we're going to become this digital mobile communications company that happens to print, right? Not a printer that uses technology. Okay, so that's their message. So then the question is, how do they get there, right? So if you understand that, it's much easier to send something persuasive about how this new process could lead to a company that is a 360-degree communications company, right? So that's a better pitch if you understand the portfolio strategy of the firm, right? And lastly, we're all humans, right? We like certain things, we don't like certain things, right? We like to go to the Buckeye games, we like to cook, we like to play golf, whatever it is, okay? And we all have aspirations, or not, right? So kind of try to get a little feel of what makes people tick, not just business, but personally. I've been in so many places where projects are approved, quite frankly, the rational part didn't make sense to me. They approved things because they liked being around these other people. They just enjoyed it. So they were weighing the two. Okay, this is a little bit better. I get all the benefits, but you know what? I just can't take it. I'm going to go with this. Right? So understand, how people want to live their life a little bit, and kind of, to the extent you can understand that a little bit, and message to them personally. So that's kind of the talk. So just to conclude today, any thoughts, any takeaways, like from my messaging, like what anything people got out of the session, you would say? Any changed your view of anything, or opinions, or? Yes.
Hello? Oh, yeah, I just, maybe it's more of just a comment. I kind of like the way you're describing the outcomes, from a kind of lean perspective. I almost think of that as like, what's your problem? What are you trying to fix? And then these are the countermeasures. So I do really like what you're saying, and putting a little different perspective on it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one comment on that. Like, let's say, I would try to dig a little deeper. If someone says, I'm trying to fix this, right? Maybe understand, well, what does that mean even deeper from an outcome? If we do fix that, what's the day in the life? Like, right? Because sometimes someone may say to you, I want to fix this, you fix this. And it may be not as powerful if you understood what the sort of the day in the life after the fix. You know what I'm saying? So I would try to go to that next step on that. Okay, anybody else?
This is Peg here. I was going to talk about selling the future. I think sometimes as ops people, we get really focused on talking about efficiencies and quality, scrap, kind of things like that, as opposed to talking about the customer, and selling that. So I think we can all be better storytellers. So I think that's really critical. And what does your boss's boss want to hear? He wants to hear about the future. Or she wants to hear about the future, not about that 10% scrap savings you had. So that's really powerful.
I also wanted to contribute to that too, Peg. I think it's cool. We all talk about brand, and I think we've heard a lot over the years about personal brands, but I like how you approach the brand of the team. So we all lead teams, and I think that's something we don't think enough about. As a team, what brand are we showing to our leaders? So that's different. I like it.
Right. Okay. And just one comment on that. A while back, I had this idea for Disney and Epcot, and I actually was walking around Epcot with the guy who heads it, and he says, we're failing in Epcot. So I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, Disney prided himself on telling stories. Epcot's become a big trade show. The GE booth and exhibit and the AT&T. Like, there's no pathways. There's no story. She goes, I'm going to get back to Epcot. So we need to tell a story. I'm going to design now the new story for Epcot, right? To your point. So, again, that was really important to him, understanding that, right? The future, Okay, anything else?
Is this on? Your story, starting with the story was, I saw that firsthand where a team brought in a video of a call center and how many different screens the call center individual had to go through to get their work done. And they put it in front of the executives to get funding for a new cost center platform. It was very effective. The other thing, my takeaway is your brand believability quotient. I really like that. And to think of trust separate from credibility. When we think about IT, we think about a lot of intelligent people. And I've been in technology for a long time, and we think, well, why don't they trust me? I'm smart. It's not about being smart, it's about being credible. And to your point, what are you going to do to me? Are you going to harm me or set me back? So I think that was something that's very valuable to think about when you're going in. And I liked your example of Trump, where if you are credible, but the group hasn't worked with you and don't trust you, take in your peer or your partner. And this is something that my peer did with me just recently, and I think it was very effective. I had something that he didn't have in a space, but he had something I didn't have. So looking at the strengths across your team and taking them in together like that. It's really powerful,
well,
I think.
I love that. Just one quick comment. That video thing is music to my ears. What would even be a next step would be to show almost in parallel the user, the customer on the other end calling in, and all the screen and the people they're passing to. So you're showing both the process improvement from the staff that they can handle 32.6% more calls without hiring, right, from an operations, but then you're showing a day in the life of the customer now is on hold longer, Right, that would be a good video, right? Yeah, okay.
So it seemed like a small nugget, but the more I think about it, over here, sorry, the job description outcome-based approach. I've only had I've interviewed a number of people over the years, and I can count on one hand the number of people who've come in and said, I see some problems I would expect someone in your position to have, and here's some solutions I can recommend. Those people get hired every time, but to actually ask people to show up and say, can you help us communicate to our sales force? Can you help us improve customer loyalty to a job interview? Sets them off on the right foot to be a great part of your organization.
Yeah, no, and here's the subtle behavioral point, which is subtle, but it's huge. So I've seen people say, okay, here's the main 5 things you should do every day, right? And you need to accomplish those, and we're going to view you. But then organizations, things change, the business, so what you really need to do changes slightly, but they're doing these 5 things. Because until someone explicitly says, Don't do it. And then people get frustrated. What do you mean? I was doing these 5 things. Okay, but it's really not working anymore. But, you know, I'm doing these 5 things, right? But if they had an outcome description, they would think, maybe I don't need to do these because their job is not those 5 things. See, they weren't told those 5 things. They were told, I'm going to measure you on this outcome. And not that I don't care the 5 things you do, but that's your thing, right? Because then you realize, okay, to accomplish that now, I maybe need to switch 3 of the things. And again, it's subtle in a naming, right? Or how you approach it. That's good. Excellent.
Okay, Maize and Blue, come on. You got something for us?
I'm interested in your ideas around storytelling, and I'm having difficulty phrasing the question, but a lot of my colleagues, you say stories, and they lock up because it's just not a part of the culture, I think, that we work in. So I'd like to hear your information or your thoughts rather around how to overcome that particular challenge as opposed to sort of with executives.
Okay, so let me answer it 2 ways. I'll address the latter part first, and then I'll share with you a little bit about, a little deeper on the storytelling component, because, you know, what is a story, right? What does it consist of? So I think it's excellent that you're starting with that you don't think using the word story is a word that would resonate with whoever, so you would lose them, right? Just like they didn't use lean, they used continuous improvement. So maybe it's how you do a program brief, or maybe it's a day in the life of a customer, right? It's how our operations will work with the major stakeholders. So it's stakeholder day in the life. You know, you can just come up with a naming convention that will resonate with, let's say, an old-time operationally driven individual who would view storytelling as fluff, right? Kind of what you're saying. Yeah. So, but if you call it something and you make it short, right? Because we talked about aha moments. No one has an aha moment with a 4-page email. 0. Okay? So if you could inspire them with, just to use the term here, a short story, right? That's good. So it's interesting. If you look out with writing skills, if you look out how authors write stories, there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's the hero. There's the protagonist, right? You could actually learn from that, right? And not to get carried away here, but you know, you can actually learn how to frame a communications that tells a story, right? From learning how people who write stories for a living, for fictional novels, you know, that's not what you're going to do, right? But if the objective of the words on any page is for the person looking at it to agree with you, right? Isn't that what we want? Okay. Whether we're right or wrong, you know, I want Jeff to agree with me. So I just, all my communication should be with that in mind, right? And then also how you tell the story could vary based on the person, right, you're sending it to, okay? And what are the elements you put in?
Cool. Any other questions? Well, we're standing right before lunch here. We really want to give Bob a big thank you.